What is your biggest fear? Your recurrent insecurity? A counselor friend asked me as I drove home late one night. I looked out of the window, startled by the unexpected question, and after a long pause, hesitantly answered, I fear not having a roof over my head. I could not believe I had finally uttered the words. These are the lines that perhaps somewhat captures the essence of the book that we shall talk about today. Bhavna Somaya is an eminent film critic, journalist, and cultural historian with a career spanning over 4 decades. She has not only chronicled the evolution of Indian film but also shaped the discourse itself. Prolific author, Somaya has written over 13 acclaimed books, which include critical histories of Hindi cinema and intimate biographies. Her celebrated works, such as Salam Bollywood, The Story So Far, and her brilliant trilogy on Amitabh Bachchan, offer a rare blend of meticulous research, narrative charm, and profound understanding of the film world. In recognition of her outstanding contribution to arts and media, she was honored the Padma Shri in 2017 by then President Shri Pranab Mukherjee. Beyond print, her voice has echoed through across platforms, radio, television, digital media. She, as the audience can easily tell, is a woman who is limitless. Today, she brings to us a deeply personal and poignant narrative through her recent work, Farewell Karachi, a departure from the world of cinema into the intimate terrain of family history, memory, and migration. Farewell Karachi, a sweeping multi-generational saga that traces the journey of a displaced Gujarati family uprooted from Karachi at the cusp of partition. Spanning over a century and 5 generations, the book paints an intricate mosaic of lives lived under the long unspoken shadow of division. From Karachi to Kutch and finally to the throbbing heart of Bombay, the family story becomes a mediation on belonging, loss, and the quiet resilience required to begin again. Through Farewell Karachi, Bhavna Somaya once again proves her mastery not only as a chronicler of stars and screens, but as a weaver of memories. As Amitabh Ghosh in his Shadow Line says, nobody knows, nobody can ever know, not even in memory, because there are moments in time that are not knowable. This lecture from Voices from the Periphery with Bhavna Somaya is an attempt to look at such unknowables. Again, we apologize for all the disruptions that we caused and the failure on our part, and we would like to begin, ma'am, this lecture with you. And we have been actually much anticipating this lecture. We have been awaiting. We are also going live on YouTube, and whatever questions our YouTube family has, we after your talk, we will be pasting here and reading them out for you, along with all the questions our audience has.
So, thank you very much, Voices from the Periphery, to invite me on your show. I'm sorry if I lost it, because what happens is that in the COVID time, we all had to get accustomed to new devices and new platforms and new technique. And this is very challenging for the senior citizens like me. I remember that my Big FM radio young assistant came to me and she taught me how to record my show the first time. And then she said, next time onward, you'll have to fend for yourself. And I said, no, this is alarming. But today I record my show on my own, I shoot the show on my own, and I do several of these Zoom meetings. But we are not equipped with a lot of connected techniques that go with it. And therefore, we get very hassled and frazzled, and we become anxious and we become nervous. And that takes away the joy from the bigger moment, like talking to the voices from the periphery. So I am glad and happy to be here and speaking about my book. Before I take any queries from the readers via you, I would just like to say that this is my 20th book, and most of my books have been on cinema and superstars, biographies and essays on cinema. In spite of that, I have done 2 translations. That is, the Prime Minister's poems I translated from Gujarati into English, titled as Letters to Mother and Letters to Self. 2 books on Lord Krishna, Krishna, the God who lived as man, and Keshava, a magnificent obsession. There is 1 book on Garbha Sanskar. and one book which translated my essays from English to Gujarati. But the rest of them are biographies of superstars, as I said, like Amitabh Bachchan, Hema Malini, and all the film personalities. Writing Farewell to Karachi was a departure from the journey I had been following so far. It is easier to write a book on a personality that you have known or are familiar with. For example, if I'm writing a book on Mr. Bachchan, then I know that he started his career in 1969 and I have to start with Saath Hindustani and I have to end it at the moment in 2025 with Kalinga. But when you start to write your memoir, where your parents are no more, where your grandparents are no more, and you're writing a history of the family, and your older siblings are no more, it is tough. But I think it had to happen, and therefore it happened. I sometimes think that I should have written it a little earlier, then my older siblings would have been there to read it and express their feedback. But it didn't happen because it was not meant to be. It had to happen now. And better late than never. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Abhinandita?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
So, how do we take this forward? Your people are going to ask me
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Uh, from the host account,
Ma'am,
I
you
would
can read out
request
the
you.
passages.
Beg your pardon?
Abhinandita, may I? Yeah,
Good
I'm
morning.
interrupting. I'm sorry, ma'am. You
Good.
can just read out the passages from your book, or you can give a short type of lecture of your book. Then we will shift to the question answering session.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, for a long time, I felt that I'm not going to be able to write this book because I wanted to visit Karachi. I wanted to smell the soil, I wanted to feel the texture, I wanted to see the architecture, and only then I could write the book. And for some strange, ironical reason, I was never able to go to Karachi. Whenever I tried, I almost came to the point of boarding a plane, but it never happened. And this is very strange because I attend so many festivals all around the world, but I was never invited to the Lahore Film Festival. I attend so many literature festivals all around the world, but I was never invited for the Karachi Literature Festival. And then one day I remembered Yash Chopra, and his son Aditya Chopra said to him that, Papa, you're making a film on Lahore and you're too old. He wanted to visit Lahore and Islamabad. And he said, you don't need to go to Pakistan because today with technology, I can bring you everything on the computer and you can choose your locations from the computer, from what is available on the net. So I said to myself that if Yash Chopra can make Veer Zara without going to Pakistan, then I can write my parents' story without visiting Pakistan. And wherever I would get stuck, I will do intensive research and investigate and recheck my facts and do it. And that's how I started. But even then, I was a little unsure. And to my good luck, my oldest sister, who was who we lost recently, she was 93. But the last 3 years, she was in dementia. But before she slipped into dementia, she had written down in Gujarati bullet points, names of all our ancestors, and also names of the places where we lived. You know, a kind of a very short outline. And that for me was the trigger point. And then, as I continued to write, I have another sister in Berlin who I had told that whenever you have the time, please write down the descriptions of our mansion in Karachi, the description of our home in Kutch, because I was not born in Karachi and I was not born when the family was in Kutch. And she kept telling me, I'll do it, but she never got down to doing it. And then she died. And then within a year, my brother-in-law died. And then my nephew, when he was clearing the house, because abroad they clear the house and they just call people and they just take away things. And within hours, the clearing of the house is over. As he ransacked my sister's bedroom, beneath her mattress, there were exercise book sheets where she has written the description of the Karachi house and the description of our Kutch home. And my nephew understood that it is because I had asked her to. And when he came to India, he got me those sheets. And it was at the right time because I was exploring our mansion, my grandparents' home. And again, one day I had gone for a funeral to Burley, and from there I visited my cousin, that is my mama's son, my uncle's son. And he said, "What a day you have come, because today somebody has given me press cutting of our grandfather when in 1896 he left Kutch to go to Karachi and make a dream come true there." And this article printed in the newspaper is about my grandfather. And he gave me that cutting. So I was at a chapter where now I could not go back and put him in the grandfather story because that is my great grandfather. So I did a flashback of my grandfather again and I described his journey of 1896. So if you look at it, it's the stories beginning in 1896 when a young boy is asked by his uncle that would you like to come with me on the steamer to Karachi? And he goes with him. And for a while he assists him. And then he becomes so good at the job that he leaves his uncle before he turns 20 and starts his own business. And he starts dealing with the Tata Birla kinds of people there. And slowly he starts his own oil business. And then he calls all his brothers from Kutch and he defines responsibilities with all of them. And that's how the family prospers. So, this is the story of the grandfather and his siblings. See, all the families had multiple siblings, unlike today, where either you are an only child or you have one sibling. My mother had 5 sisters and 3 brothers. My father had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. So both of them had large families. Then everybody had children. So I think the whole joint family system, probably when my grandfather asked my father and my uncle to move out in Karachi, it must have been the first nuclear family. And it was done in good faith and with a lot of joy, not out of any ill will. And the oldest sister in law opens up the kitchen, and all the things that she has in duplicates or triplets, whether it is thalis, pots, pans, spoons, kadhais, everything is distributed in 3 so that all of them have the same. And then my mother does that for all her children when they move out. How a kitchen has so much in excess that it can easily start multiple homes, provided आपका दिल बड़ा है. अगर दिल बड़ा है तो हाथ बड़ा होता है. So it's all very interesting, the joint family system, how they lived peacefully, how they divided responsibilities, and then the pain of the World War I, World War II, the calamities it brought, and then the partition news when they got to know that they were being attacked at home and their things being taken away, and how difficult it was even for my father to get steamer tickets. And then he gets steamer tickets, and my father and mother board the steamer with their 6 children because 6 of my siblings are born in British India. So, 6 children are taken on the steamer, and my father comes to Kutch, settles them down, and goes back in this riot time to Karachi. And everybody tells him he's making a mistake. because he may not come back alive. And he's untraceable for 2-3 months. Because when the partition happened, the postal lines were cut down and the telephone lines were cut down. Nobody could reach out to anybody. Nobody knew where their relatives were. And then one day my father comes back and the family heaves a sigh of relief, but he's almost unrecognizable because he's gone through so much. And after that, how he he goes to Bombay because he's working with Burma Shell. He lives for himself for a while. He hunts for a rented apartment, then calls for his family, that is again 6 children and wife 7, and then begins the journey. And much later, in the late 50s, my older sister is born and then I'm born. So we were born to our parents when they were in their 50s. I and my sister have never seen my parents young, unlike my other siblings. They were always old. They had grey hair. And in the school, when we had to write down, what does your father do? I was told by my older siblings to write retired. I was too young to know the meaning of retired. And every time the teacher had an expression on her face, and then she looked at me again. And I wondered that why were all the teachers so curious about me just because I said retired, and I thought maybe retired meant some big Padma award or something. Because for me as a child, anything associated with my father was very special. So I think the point I would like to make to your viewers is there are all kinds of challenges. There are all kinds of calamities. There is nothing like a perfect setting, and there is nothing like a perfect timing. You come with your destiny and you fit into your environment, and the environment shapes you, molds you, and gives you ample opportunities, and there is abundance. We were middle class family, but there was no deprivation, either at home or outside. There was nothing we wanted to do that we were not allowed to do. There was nothing that was happening in the school that we were never allowed to participate. We watched all the movies. My parents took us for a Hindi movie every week. Maybe that's why I became a journalist. That is why when I meet young couples and who says कि आजकल कितना महंगा है, कहाँ अफोर्ड होते हैं बच्चे, उनकी एजुकेशन में ही कितना निकल जाता है, अभी नहीं मेरा ये प्रोजेक्ट है, उसके बाद मैं बच्चा करने का सोचूंगी. Who are you to plan? You are nobody. It is God who will decide when the child will come. And even if you are busy, you can continue to work. Your work is happening, the child is growing in your womb. And when the child is born, trust the universe. The universe will open opportunities and provide ways of which the child can be reared. Somebody, somewhere, some mother-in-law will come and take care. Otherwise, some maid will come, a trusting maid. But it happens. I trust the universe, and I feel that whatever comes to me comes for my good. And I feel I am blessed and privileged that I was born to my parents, and she conceived me when she was 45 and I was born when she was 46. She was in failing health. She could not even walk from the hospital room to the cab because I was her 8th child. And yet I got so much from her, so much. I'll try and read some passage. I don't know how the light will be. I'll just try to check the light here, or I'll put on a light. So, first, I think I would like to continue with the passage that you started with, where my therapist is talking to me. I don't know till where did you reach. Yeah. I think you left it at, I could not believe I had finally
Yes,
uttered the words. It has
yes, yes.
been, okay, it has been a long held, recurring fear. And even though I knew it is illogical and baseless, the demons continue to haunt me. Every time I drive on a lonely night, I unwittingly search the desolate streets for a secure corner to hide in case my worst nightmare comes true. And have you analyzed where your fear originates? My friend prodded. I shook my head. It reflects a deep and acute feeling of displacement. She continued, my therapist friend. My first thought, which I voiced aloud, was, but I have never been displaced, but your parents have. And you are the recipient of the deep scars they endured during the 1947 partition. I was not convinced. How can you be impacted by something you have not personally encountered? Assuming my parents' migration impacted me. Assuming my parents' migration impacted me, could my deep rooted fear be a manifestation of all the stories I heard from my parents in my growing up years? And if this is true, then my older siblings should have been deeply scarred, but I never sensed their anguish. Parents devote a lifetime to their children, but most children are blissfully unaware of their parents' journeys. I have memories of fragmented conversations with my parents about their migration when I was a little girl. The interesting anecdotes stored in my subconsciousness, and the insignificant ones conveniently blanked out. It is strange that a professional like me, who built a career chronicling the lives of superstars, paid little attention to capturing the milestones of my own family. It is because children take their parents for granted, and because parents don't emphasize their struggles. My parents did occasionally, but the narrative was interrupted by a humming domesticity. दूध वाला आया, कोई और आया, कोई मेहमान आया. And the sensitive moments almost always got hijacked by the mundane. As I grew older, I became curious about their roots and yearned to visit our ancestral home in Karachi, Pakistan, but that never happened. I traveled to Kutch as recently as January 2024 and visited Mandvi port, where thousands of migrants arrived post partition. Today, the address is a tourist spot. As I stood by the jetty, watching a wrecked ship tied to a small boat floating in the rough sea against the setting sun, I tried to visualize my weary parents clutching their 6 children close to their chests and lugging multiple trunks as they arrived on the Indian shore. It must have been a terrifying experience, but my older siblings have no recollection of their distress. My parents did not transmit their fears to their children. Therefore, my siblings embraced the new experiences as an adventure. It was not easy for my parents to give up the land they had revered as home and build a new life in a new place. Their eyes sparkled every time they met old relatives from across the border. Decades passed, and even though home was now Mumbai in India, Karachi was omnipresent in their conversations, a constant reference point, to the extent that even today I think of Karachi not as a city in a neighboring country, but as a lost sibling. Farewell Karachi is the story of a family finding its roots in a country that was at the cusp of change and how it shaped all of them and the nation. A story spanning more than 100 years, 5 generations, and innumerable dreams. A story of courage and building many nests. I would like to read more, but the lighting is not sufficient, so it's a little complicated. But I think the viewers get an idea.
Absolutely. And if you'll allow us, maybe we can have some discussion on the kind of passage you wrote and the kind of language you use, because honestly, we as literature students, we keep reading partition literature. And then there's always this distance, right? Because also you are using words like how you're visualizing, right? How the presence that it's omnipresent, right? Your generation is perhaps a little closer to the partition than ours, but then even in our generation we feel like it is so far away, but it's all there in memory, it's all there in inheritance, but we don't realize it. But perhaps through your work and throughout this lecture we gradually realize how it has affected us, the trauma that exists. So you were talking about how your parents never you know uh, passed on the trauma, or like gave you a chance to realize all they had been through, right? But then if you reflect back to your childhood, do you think there were moments when that kind of insecurity about displacement would come out here and there and you did not realize back then as a child, but now you do?
It's very strange. It's a very nice question. What happens is that your parents go through an experience as big as the partition. Now they have come to a new land and made a home out of it. And you are born many years later. The stories are there on the dining table while you are meeting your grandparents, while you go to your aunts. Karachi was always there in the conversation. But it was not building up into anything in my head or heart at that time. And you have a persona, a personality, or an emotional makeup as an individual, which was pointed out to me when I started working, because your friends accept you the way you are, but your colleagues and peers, you are always told that this is a part of your personality, this is something that you have in you, which you are not aware of. So I was always told that I was anxious, I was hypersensitive, and I wondered where it all came from. Of course, my parents, because I'm a product of their personalities. But it also came the angst and the restlessness, the something indescribable, something not completely comprehensible came from their unarticulated anxiety. Maybe the other siblings did not get trapped in it because they all got married early and left the nest. And maybe because I nurtured them till the end, I was getting it all the time. Like I was bathing in it. But it is so strange that when that therapist friend who was with me in the car, and when she asked me this question, and when I said it to her, and after I've written this book, I have suddenly shed all the baggage. I'm suddenly liberated. It's like I have now accepted everything, my restlessness, my anxiety, and I'm so much calmer. I still get frazzled by technological glitches, which rattles me and I go completely out of control. But I mean, otherwise, as an emotional makeup person.
That makes so much sense because it feels like almost writing this book, you have healed a lot of generational trauma that have been, cyclically passed
Yeah.
on through generations. Yeah, and I don't know, but then if we really think about it, right now today maybe authors like you and critics and journalists like you have the privilege to write such a book that people are reading, but do you think others can heal such generational trauma that comes from partition through literature?
I think so. I'll tell you why. Because almost everyone, this is a nervous cough, almost everyone who has read the book has phoned me up and started crying on the phone. And they all are finding echoes of their own families. See, partition may not be a common factor for everybody, but migration is. All, all of us have migrated from somewhere or the other. Most of the people who are working in Bombay have come from somewhere else. They're living away from their parents. They are trying to find a home in this bustling city. So, also, there is a sense of loss because by the end of the book, the parents are no more, the siblings are no more. It's like a large family is disintegrated. But then that is life. If you started as a big family, you have to eliminate. And if you started as a single unit, you have to expand. There is no mourning and there is no tragedy in this. Some people, I was unfortunately born at a cusp where I was born too old and I had to bid farewell to the older ones. So everything about my life was a little unusual in that sense. But I like it. I think because my circumstances were unusual, then maybe I'm unusual. And now I see positivity in everything.
You were also saying how by the time you were writing, a lot of the people were gone. So it's, in a way, it's not only your story, it's so many people's story altogether, with the people who are portrayed and then the people who are reading them. Where do you think the ethics comes in all of it? Because how you are portraying your parents or how you're talking about your siblings, there has been a certain way and it's completely your perspective, but then कितना आप बात कर सकती है उस उन पे, कितना यू कैन, कितना बोल सकती है? डू यू वांट टू talk a little about that?
No, I am unable to understand your question.
My question is, when we are writing something as a partition memoir, we are portraying a lot of people with us, and then in that portrayal, do you think if all of those people, they were alive today, do you think they would treat your writing in a certain way, or have you ever questioned yourself how much of them can you write in this book?
See, I was very clear that I'm not going to talk to all of them because in my head and heart I was writing the book even when they were alive. I wanted to write this book, I was very certain of that. That I was very clear that I'm not going to talk to all of them and say, what do you think of what do you think of Ba and what do you think of Bapuji? Because this book is not about a portrait of just Ba and Bapuji. It is a portrait of their journey. And it is a portrait of a family that I am perceiving as the youngest heir. And I am projecting my siblings and my parents from the stories I have been told by them, which are stored in my memory. And It's my point of view. And if they agree or disagree, they are free to write their own perspective in their books. Because it's not like I'm doing a marathon on Amitabh Bachchan that I have to meet all his directors and get their perspective on Black and Piku. Because I'm not the director of Piku or Black, but here I am the child of my parents. I have a perspective and I have a valid perspective. And I think the triumph of the book is that it's completely honest, and that is why it touches so many hearts. And at the same time, it is not derogatory of anyone. Every family or relationship has layers and layers and layers. But we don't discuss all the layers in public. And if you are somebody who leads a positive life, then you don't delve in the negative. And none of my siblings have a problem with it because their second generation are reading with it. But you're right. The point is that it's not just my story, it is a story of the family, and I'm projecting all of them. But then these are things which are the truth, and I know it.
Yeah, that confidence in authorship is something perhaps us as the younger generation has a lot to learn from. That confidence in that this is my perspective and I'll write it honestly and as it is.
See, I'll tell you what, I don't know much about the young authors because they don't interact with me. But if I can, through your medium, say, what they need to learn is that discipline and projection and honesty. These are three things they have to practice and put forth. If you think that you're going to write a masterpiece and wait and wait and wait, it's never going to happen. And you can't write like somebody else or like somebody else's book. You have to do it your way. And you should say to yourself, this is the way I know it. This is the way it's coming to me naturally. And I'll do it to the best of my ability. And it works. A lot of people told me that you're writing about 5 generations of your family. Only celebrities, when they write about their 5 generations, people would read. Why would they be interested in a common man's family? My argument is, it is a very special family. They went through very special journey. I am saying it. If you don't want to read it, don't read it. But I'm documenting it, archiving it, putting together the emotional experiences for my coming generations. And to be proud of the fact that we had such splendid ancestors. I'm proud to be my parents' child. I'm proud of my grandparents. And I have done this book to salute them. And the interesting thing is that once you put the EQ, that is the emotion quotient, and when you read it while typing it, and if I can cry while reading my own book, then the reader is going to cry. I am the best judge of my book. I am the best judge of my writing because I don't tell lies to myself. And I'm not expecting anybody to praise me. I don't want it. And because of that, when I sent the manuscript to my agent, she was positive. And when my agent pitched it, the first publisher she pitched to was positive. And in fact, I told the publisher that on the book cover, I have always visualized my parents' sepia picture, old studio picture. And he said, no, Bhavna, that will look like an obituary. And he didn't even ask me, he searched my picture. And he said, I was very clear. I wanted your picture, and it should be a younger you, and we'll split it apart in India, Pakistan. So I think the beauty is that you must know when to surrender to whom. Here was a young dynamic publisher, Bloomsbury, who was thinking it completely differently. He's not doubting my authenticity and my book, but he's projecting it in such a dynamic way. And I surrendered to it, and it's worked.
Interpretations are so important. We have learned that every day, in our literature classes. And on that note, actually, there have been questions coming in, and I think I'll read those questions out. Okay, there are a lot of questions. Okay. Ayush is asking, many young people today know about partition through textbooks or news articles, but memoirs like yours offer an emotional bridge across generations. Absolutely. If a young reader were to ask, what does partition mean to you personally? How would you answer them beyond dates and borders?
I think it's a lot of heartbreaks. And I think that I've seen all the movies on partition, read so many books on partition, but it's when my cousin sister, who's been quoted in the book, when she describes the chilling incident when her she was a child and those people just invaded and attacked the ladies of the house and put the whole house on fire and left. That is far more impactful for me than anything else that I watched on the screen. My mother said a very strange thing. She said, महात्मा गांधी ने अच्छा नहीं किया, पार्टीशन तो करा दिया, मगर पहले हिंदूज और मुसलमान को अगर अलग करना था तो पहले डिवाइड कर देते, लोग यहाँ चले जाते, वो वहां चले जाते, उसके बाद बंटवारा का अनाउंस करना चाहिए था. इन लोग ने बंटवारा का अनाउंसमेंट पहले किया और फिर रास्ते में इतना ज्यादा सब खून खराबा हो गया. सबके अपने इंटरप्रिटेशंस हैं.
Yeah, and to hold those together is, I don't know, it's a work of mastery. I'll read the next question. Shayuntan Shorkar is asking, food, music, language, smells. Very interesting, smells. Okay. Sometimes these small sensory memories that stay with us are what stays with us the longest. Is there a particular sight, sound, or taste of old Karachi that still lives vividly in your mind and is found its way into your book?
I was not born in Karachi. I have to say this again and again.
Yeah.
People just think that now I was born in Karachi, and but my parents and my siblings used to say that वहाँ की खुशबू, वहाँ की धूप, वहाँ की चांदनी, रोशनी एंड हवा अलग होती थी. I feel I didn't witness all that, but a lot of cuisine, a lot of language residue remained in the family for generations, and certain food that was cooked at home are called Karachi dishes.
Do you have like a personal favorite that you like to cook, which comes from?
I don't cook, but I have taught my house help. So, there is a kind of a ragda, but it is more gravy wala, because everything about the Gujaratis, the dal is thin, the ragda is thin. So everything is more fluidy, which we put on slices of bread. And then we do a lot of toppings on it, like spring onion, some crispy things, then some chutneys and onions, tomatoes, hari mirch, and then coriander. So whenever I make this, I send these plates to everybody in the building whom I like, and they all call it a Karachi dish.
It's so wonderful that it's still here, pieces of it, and then you're sharing it along.
And I also posted a picture of it in my Instagram.
Okay. That's, yeah. No, that's a very good question. Food and smell and how they get carried on.
Yeah.
Truly. Okay. Rakhi is asking, memoirs like Farewell Karachi often preserve memory, but memory can also be curated, romanticized, even sanitized. Okay, this is getting controversial now. Do you think there's a danger in memoirs becoming comforting narratives of loss rather than unsettling confrontations with privileged silence or complicitly during partition?
The question reflects a very cynical point of view. I think these words are more rosy to sound than more truthful. When the first draft went to my agent, her editor said that the author is projecting her father as a paragon of virtues. I mean, she didn't say it exactly like that, but it was something like that. And I said, no, my father was even a bigger hero than what I have been able to project. Because, you know, in the old 70s, when we saw this hero in the movies like Amitabh Bachchan, who did everything noble and all, he was that kind of a man. He endured so many hardships and he was a family man and he had a very compatible, solid equation, equal equation with my mother. And that kind of reflected in all the children's sense of security and also well being and mental health. We had never seen them argue, use foul language. So there was a decorum. And I think the siblings tried to emulate that in their marriages.
Also, I mean, how a daughter projects her father in her book, I don't think a publisher can dictate that perspective, can they? No.
No, they were not dating, and the publisher had
Hmm.
not come into the picture at that time. This was the
Uh,
this was the opinion of the editor. But the editor means they have, when you give it your copy manuscript to the agent, she has readers. You know, young girls like you. Now, what happens is that young girls like you, not meaning to be demeaning, they have lived a certain span of life, and they don't know the gaze of a much older person. So I am open to your suggestion, I'm open to your question, but it cannot dictate my life, my book, or anything.
absolutely. It's more comes off more of as a suggestion then. Yeah. Okay. So this question comes from our main account. So I am guessing Pallav is asking it. Uh, while writing a memoir, especially about something as personal and painful as partition, did you ever find yourself pausing, not because you forgot a detail, but because it was felt too deeply? Could you share a moment that was particularly difficult to write yet very necessary?
So the one chapter that was the most difficult was when my father goes back in the riots time after settling the family in the Kutch to Karachi, and then he is untraceable, and my mother is in depression. The children don't know when the father is coming back. We don't know if he's alive or dead. And then he finally gets his work order from the Marshal, and he books a steamer ticket. But before he can board the steamer, there is so much of rush that the steamer floats away. And now there is an overwhelming cry of despair for those who have not been able to get on board. And so they jump onto a fisherman's boat and they endure a very hard and a harsh journey, which is really tough because you're open to the sea and there is harsh sunlight, rains, there is no food, and you have already gone through so much of bruises and battles from the lathi charges before you could jump onto this boat. And then he gets down at the Mandavi port And now he has to still walk a mile before he can board a bus. And then there is no place in the bus, so he's sitting on the floor. And then he gets off at this Bhuj. And he has to again walk a mile with bleeding feet, not barefoot, clothes torn. And he finally reaches our bungalow or cottage and opens that outside gate click. And my oldest brother comes down with a stick, thinking it is a cattle. And he's shooing away. He cannot recognize my father because my father is tanned, scarred, bruised, torn clothes, disheveled, rustful, unrecognizable, like a scavenger, like a scavenger. And slowly the lights in the bungalow come up, and my brother is unable to show him off because my father has no energy. And he's still trying to walk in because it's his home. And then my mother comes from behind and she says, it's him. And she collapses. Every time I wrote this, because you don't just write it once, you write it and you sculpt it and you sculpt it till you are completely satisfied. Every time I wrote it, I was crying. And I felt very sad that I was not there for my parents at that time. But how could I be there for them because I was not born?
So many stories come in, and I don't know if I should say this because it's personal, but it's the book and all of your reading is like bringing it back. But my grandfather was a refugee from Bangladesh itself, and I have heard stories of him sleeping on a brick as a pillow under his head after coming here, and how he was saying after that then they had to build their lives all again, to begin again, and he had to do all of that, and it's bringing it all back. And you're right, the trauma stays, the trauma exists. So thank you so much. I think a few last questions I'm gonna take from YouTube. Okay. All right. Right, okay. Family stories often get passed down in fragments over dinner tables, in silences or whispers, like you were saying. Yeah. Was there a particular story or silence in your family that prompted you to finally write this memoir?
It is not one incident, it is not one conversation.
Yeah.
It was a collage. And the whole challenge was to make the collage fall into an order seamlessly, woven stories together like a film script that engages you and gets you involved in the author's voice. There is a story where my mother suffers a miscarriage, and she is whole day and night on the bed stuffing old saris inside herself to stop the bleeding. My father used to do 2 jobs, a day job and a night job. She doesn't tell him that she's suffering a miscarriage because he's worked the whole day and he's worked the whole night. So she allows him to have his few hours of sleep. And when she looks at the clock, that this is the time the hospital's open, she wakes him up gently and says that I need to go to the hospital. This kind of compassion, of supportive partner, the wisdom, a selflessness is not there in today's generation or in the marriages. Something happens and they immediately ring up their partner and they complain. And it's because the mobile phones allow it. And they all are so eager to immediately share without processing it, and which is destroying the foundation of relationships. One second, हाँ, I have to just deal with something. क्या आपको जाना है भैया? हाँ ठीक है, अभी बोलना मत है कुछ, हाँ बोलो, sorry.
No, no. Definitely. And you have seen life much more than perhaps most of our audience here has. But do you think somewhere, I don't know, this is a very personal question again. Do you think all of these struggles of women there exists and then it needs to be portrayed? But do you think somewhere women suffering and women taking a lot on themselves, it gets glorified? Like, yeah.
No. I think it all depends on perspectives. And when we have these kind of discussions, then we, in trying to look at new perspectives and new directions, then we just extend our thesis, and then we get fatigued by it. At least I get fatigued. Maybe you don't.
I have just begun, so let's. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like, there's a lot of pressure on women to live up to such standards of sacrifice, even
No,
in marriages.
no, nobody's asking you to make sacrifices. Nobody's asking you to be a superwoman. You just do what you want. If you can, if you can balance both, you do it. If you can't balance both, just be one. Decide you want to be a wife. Decide you want to be a career woman. If you want to balance both, then get support system. But you want to do everything yourself and then you want to complain that you are exhausted, I don't have sympathy for you. For example, let me give a small example. Friday is my review day. Last night I watched Sitare Zameen Par. I get up in the morning, I'm writing my review. After that, I have to do an audio recording. After that, I have to shoot the review. And I forgot all this and I'd called workers in my house. So they're all around my house while I'm doing this. I just go to them and I say, just keep quiet for 15 minutes. I am doing the audio recording. Then I tell them, don't talk, don't take your phone calls. I'm shooting. Then I told them, just now I'm doing this. It's not a big deal. You don't have to make it so important. Our mothers cooked in the kitchen, and when guests came, they were just making more food. We were never conscious of it. I was never asked to help in the kitchen. She just did it, and she never made a big deal about it. So if I'm writing or I'm giving interviews or I'm doing recording and I'm shooting, I should just be able to do it. And if the house help tells me that the following things are missing, I say, okay, there is a mental note. Before she comes in the morning, I order it on the phone. And if it's not there, I borrow an onion or a tomato from my neighbor. But what I do is I go back and return one tomato and one onion. And they say, why are you returning? I said, no, because I might borrow it again. So I want to have a hand that is upper. Now my throat is aching.
Okay, we'll take one last question from YouTube and then, okay. Okay, and I think this is also a good note to end this question, which is why I'm choosing these questions, even though there are quite a few. As readers, we are often shaped by what we expect from a partition story. And I think I relate to this because we read very particular kinds of partition stories, even in our syllabus. Okay. Were you ever worried that your personal experience might not align with the mainstream partition discourse? How do you want your readers, especially the young ones, to engage with the book differently?
I have no expectations from anybody for anything. I wrote the book because it was in my head and heart, and I wanted to tell my parents' story. I wanted to tell my family journey, and I did an honest job of it. Now, how well it does at the bookstore, who comes to what conclusions about it, who is going to archive it, are students going to study it, our education is going to put it on the syllabus, I don't care. That was not the motive, that was not the agenda. People ask me again and again that do you want to make a film out of it? Do you want to make a series out of it? I don't think so much. Whatever is in my store, in my destiny, it will come to me and it will happen. I don't chase it. I don't chase dreams. I don't chase people. I don't seek jobs. I don't seek approval. I don't seek validation. I'm content, I'm contained, and I'm happy.
That is quite a perspective. Did this come with time, or were you always this way that things will come to me? And
No, no. It comes with time. It comes with time, it comes with age, and it comes with surrender. I don't want to, the minute you stop controlling, the minute you stop holding the leash, that is the time the universe opens its arms for you. When I go for my lectures to students, I tell them, money will come to you, but not from the quarter where you are expecting it. Love will come to you too, but not from the quarter where you are expecting it. And the day you stop seeking money, a job, or love, is when everything will fall into place. Drop your anxiety. Trust the universe. You are not the director of this life. Somebody else is the director. You are a performer. And today's scene of my role is that I'm chatting with you guys. So many things were happening before 3:30 where I felt I didn't even know if I'll be able to do it. But around 3:45, I made a cup of tea for myself. I called my driver up and I said, fix this because my house is in a mess at the moment. They're polishing the furniture. I didn't know where to put the computer because my study is occupied. I told him to make a free arrangement here where he's fixing it. And then we were having technical glitches. हो गया और अभी बहुत हो थक गई मैं इससे ज़्यादा मेरे को नहीं बोलना है. I have to save my voice. I'm a radio jockey.
thank you, ma'am, so much. I think that is also a perfect note to end because we are for performers and life is a stage, and we'll see what happens is what we are going to end this on. Thank you so much, ma'am. We are honored to have you. Perhaps someday we can do another one with maybe with your upcoming book, and then we won't have technical issues, and we will also take your number and call you if there are technical issues.
Okay. See, there are kinds and kinds of anger. There are some who get angry and then keep it in their heart for years. And there are some who are like soda bottle. You allow the fizz to get out and they calm down. Okay.
Absolutely. I hope the phase is out.
Blessings
Thank you.
to you, your team, and to all my viewers. And please grab a copy and read it because you have to encourage authors. An author writes 50 to 75,000 words, sculpting it and sculpting it. Do 75,000 people read the book? No. Because today, ordering a copy has become so easy, and people are ordering so much that they just order a book. The book will be lying next to them, but they will not read it. If they read it, they will not put a review on the Amazon. They will not go to the Goodreads and put it. Goodreads. It is insensitive. Because if you buy the book, then you read it. If you read the book, then you review it. 4 lines you can't put together. You are an educated person. Because that's how the sales come up. It just shows that we are living in such a fast, rapid, consumeristic world where nobody has time for anybody. So reflect, soul search, and introspect.
On that note, now you know, read the book, engage with it, write a comment, write your review, honest review, as honestly as ma'am has written the book. And on that note, we shall end this talk. Thank you, ma'am.
Should we take a screenshot?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can ask
Post.
others to come on to it also.
Guys, if you can come on, please come on. And
Whoever
also,
can come on, just take a screenshot. I don't know to take. You all take.
Okay. Voices from the periphery, please take a screenshot. We'll also send your team the screenshot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, it's taken. Thank you, ma'am.